Hello again, welcome back. The subject of this video is a very interesting pipe. It's a 1954 ODA Dunhill model 838, which as you can see is a large, some people call it a Rhodesian, others a bulldog, depending on shank shape, that's irrelevant. It's extremely desirable, collectible. Very few of these were made in any finish, and even fewer were made in the patent era, which this one was. It could literally have been just in the dozens. Nobody knows, but judging by the conversations I've had with collectors who seek these out, they are the proverbial hen's teeth. So there can't be many out there. Now the problem here is obvious. The stem is a replacement. It's not original to the pipe. It's been given a duck bill, or has, maybe it was a molded stem that was already that way. Duck bill profile, which is an inexpensive look, and 50 years, half century ago, people didn't much care about authenticity, and you'd re-stem a pipe the same way you'd re-sole shoes, or maybe get another set of tires on your car. It just wasn't a big deal. Today, however, that matters. So the owner of this piece wants to make it look the same way it did back when it was made. So now, I've already made some stems, videos of making stems, so I won't do it again, get into the basics yet again, but I'll focus on some of the details. And since this is such a remarkable Dunhill specimen, I thought we'll talk about some of the things that are relevant to Dunhill in particular. It's the most popular collectible for the people who like Old English pipes. Barling's a contender, but I think the sheer numbers produced and the nomenclature thing is more fun, I guess, for the people that go after Dunhills. In any event, you're probably wondering how it can be told at a glance that this stem is not original, as opposed to being one that was original or started out the correct shape, which is where the top line is a straight line, and it's tapered from the side in a diamond shape. And you can tell that's not been the case for several reasons. The tapering on the bottom, for example, starts far too late. It would have to go back about under the dot here. The tenon does not have the trademark shoulder to the face of the stem here, and by that I mean the tool that they used to cut those for a long time. Now some of the later ones it's not the case, but in this era it absolutely was, where there's three surfaces, distinct surfaces, as opposed to the angle between the stem body and the tenon being sharp. It's rounded. And here I've got an authentic stem here, and I think you can see that the difference there, or at least see a highlight. There we go, coming off of the radius there. That's completely flat, sitting at 45 degrees. Some other indicators: the end of the button is wrong. It's too football shaped. It should be lower in the center, a little higher on the sides, and also the slot on this has square ends as opposed to rounded. And here is, I selected a stem that's the same external width to use as comparison, and you'll notice the slot is taller, it's rounded, and the button is flatter. Not by much. This is the kind of stuff that collectors would notice, and a general somebody walking down the sidewalk would say, "Oh yeah, they're the same." But in the pipe world, it's details that matter. Also, very typical of a cast stem, meaning molded, pre-molded stem, is the shape of the end here, where it turns in. It's 45 degrees or so. To quite a depth, and then compare that with this, that it runs very nearly straight to the ends with just an ever so slight rounding. And finally we come to the dot, which actually, that's the best part of this stem. Whoever cut this dot actually did a good job. It's not distinguishable from an original at first glance. And while we're on the subject of digression regarding dots, you'll notice this dot has a hole in it. And how is that possible? You wonder if it's ivory, which is very durable, tough, rugged stuff. Well, a needle did that, a hot needle. It's just heated, held in a pair of pliers, heated in a flame, touched. Poof, went off almost like a little tiny fireworks. It just made a little puffy, snappy sound, and some smoke was released and smelled weird. Well, that is not ivory, but a special type of plastic called celluloid that was very popular in the early 20th century. And its component chemicals make it quite flammable, as you can tell. Guitar picks are made from it, some pen bodies. Celluloid's not a rare material, but why it's interesting here is that for a long time, and I count myself among them, people assumed that Dunhill pipes, Dunhill being a luxury brand, at least in the latter half of the 20th century, the assumption was that they used luxury ingredients, so to speak, or components, and that had to be ivory. And my argument was that although it's tedious grinding ivory into thin rods, when you could source stuff like that from Asia 100 years ago, you could probably get it at a very reasonable cost and not have to pay English workers or European workers to grind it into little rods. And a pipe world's noted citizen named Rob Cooper suggested to me that no, that makes no sense for that to have ever been ivory, and that he was certain that it was a type of plastic, celluloid being his best guess. And we went back and forth about the likelihood of each case until finally it was decided by doing an ivory test. Ivory is common with a lot of collectibles in the world of various kinds, not just pipes. And the standard test is a hot needle to see if it's real ivory, because it's basically inert. You can't burn it with anything as hot, or it can burn, but it takes a very high temperature, and a needle won't do it. And so I had to write Rob back and say, you're right. It's been celluloid all along. And there were some people who didn't even want to believe that, who continued to dig. Other people besides Rob that were interested in the collecting hobby. And they actually found a copy of the original patent from over 100 years ago. And the white dot was mentioned, and it was listed as an ivory look-alike plastic. So that was settled. Anyway, and the relationship of the ivory then is, in order to keep things looking right in terms of color and shade, I've been using real ivory, now not elephant ivory, but walrus ivory for many years to put dots in my replica Dunhill stems. But that isn't the right way to go anymore. Now, I looked for a source of celluloid, couldn't find it. It's apparently legally it's difficult to manufacture and sell that stuff anymore because it's so hazardous. Warehouses catch fire and burn down in a second or something. I couldn't quite get the straight story, but in any event, I was very happy with coming up with someone I know in the trade, supply side of pipe repair, located for me, brought back from China, this block. There is a little bit longer to start with, that is the highest grade of synthetic ivory that's available in Asia, where ivory is a very big deal. They make all kinds of stuff out of it, and they put some effort into making this look the real thing. And it's got the grain and the whole 9 yards. You really couldn't tell the difference unless you did a chemical test or maybe a magnifying, like a microscope. So anyway, that got sliced into like bread loaf pieces, and those were subsequently sliced into little sticks. And if you've watched my videos before, you know my trick is to chuck this in a electric drill, cordless drill, and spin it backwards against a sanding belt going the other direction and grinding it down into a fine little post that's whatever size I want. You just do it that way. So this is going to be what we'll make the dot out of. The stem itself is going to be NYH. It's a formulation of vulcanite that's a little more firm than some of the other ones, and that's by choice because we're going to be making a prism stem, something that's got facets like a diamond almost, and it's keeping those edges crisp and sharp when you shine it is critical and difficult. So something that's on the harder side is the way to go. So we'll be using that. And the final thing we need to talk about is, tell you what, I'm going to shut the camera off and make a part B on this so that the individual segments don't get too long or cover too many subjects. So I'm going to shut this off, start it up again, and pick up where I left off.